Buzzer beaters account for a massive number of the most memorable plays in sports history. That last-second jump shot, that stoppage time winner, the player advantage goal with the goalie pulled. Time inflates all stakes, and inflated stakes makes for massive moments. But in Quidditch, buzzer beaters are incredibly rare commodities. Under the standard USQ endgame rules, in order for a game to have a buzzer beater, it needs to first go to overtime, then go a full 5 minutes without a snitch grab, and then the score still needs to be in a margin of under 10 points. And for it to be memorable, all these things need to happen in a game that has film and has stakes, which realistically only includes regionals and nationals. So what if I told you that, a half-decade ago, not one, but two massive matches came down to their final possession. One a regional final, chock full of young talent about to take the sport by storm, and one a national final with the highest stakes imaginable. One with a Billy Qua highlight reel, and both with incredible main camera angles of the gameplay. 2 games, 2 chances for buzzer beaters, 2 shots at history. What went right and what went wrong? Let's start with the first one and break it down. Our first match takes us back to the World Cup 8 season, specifically the finals match of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Championship. Maryland was, and still is, the dominant force in the region, having made every MARC final to date and looking to pick up its second regional title. They entered the tournament with an incredibly stacked senior class that would make a run all the way to the Final Four at World Cup that year. UNC, meanwhile, was an upstart team with an exciting run-and-gun offensive style way ahead of its time, and they themselves would go all the way to the Elite Eight at Nationals that year. On an unseasonably cold night, with the sun setting in the middle of the match, UNC came out guns a-blazing, pulling out ahead and threatening to put the game out of range for good before a Harry Greenhouse catch forced overtime. The teams exchanged blows throughout the extra session before the Terrapins finally made an error with under 30 seconds to go. Ryan Barrows bringing the ball down the field in a no-bludger situation, Eric King attempts a pick on Max Maselli. But because King approaches him from a straight-on angle, Maselli is able to slip past the screen and make a wrap. Barrows dishes it to Aaron Mowry, but David Culhane is there with a second wrap. As Mowry goes to ground, she attempts to feed an open Eric King, but Emma Troxler makes a great awareness play, leaving her coverage assignment behind her to put a hand into the passing lane and knock the ball down. The ball lands at the feet of her keeper, Andrew McGregor. McGregor smartly pushes the pace before the Maryland defense can set itself, with Aaron Mowry even on the ground behind the play. But luckily for the Terrapins Quaffle players, beater Jeremy Dane has recognized the situation and moved away from the seeker play and into the driving lane, as you can see right here all the way onto the line. Unfortunately, King compounds his earlier mistake by running through the back of a charging McGregor, who had nowhere to go thanks to Dane. Doing so, he picks up an obvious yellow card, which stacked into a red card. As referee Michael Clark-Polner stops play, there are 21 seconds remaining on the clock. From here, we need to watch the play through twice, once following the beater play and once following the Quaffle play. We'll start with the beater play. At the time of the restart, Jeremy Dane is armed directly in front of McGregor, while partner Ricky Delson is armed directly next to the snitch. UNC's Kyle Bolins is off screen to the left tracking down a ball. Despite having time to assess the situation during the stoppage, Nelson does not take note of Bolins' positioning, allowing him to blindside him with a beat off of the restart. But Bolins takes some power off the throw, perhaps worried about a long ricochet in the closing seconds, and loses some accuracy in the process. As Nelson turns a second too late, Bolins' beat zooms by him anyway, leaving UNC without a bludger, and Nelson completes the sequence with a tap beat on Bolins. This allows Dane on the other side of the field to freely pressure Max Maselli high and force a pass, which he then chases down to force the turnover. But what's more important perhaps than this is what has become of the UNC bludger. As we switch camera angle to the snitch view, we see Shauna Hines re-enter the frame from the right side after retrieving Bolins' missed beat. As Nelson makes a beat on UNC seeker Chris Champito and the timekeeper calls out 8 seconds, Hines has a key and difficult decision to make. Maryland has just taken over possession of the Quaffle, the snitch Jack Harbour has made a beeline across the pitch, and Maryland seeker Harry Greenhouse is trailing behind him. In this split-second moment, it is up to Hines to decide what is the most likely occurrence in the next 8 seconds, a Greenhouse pull or a Maryland goal. Harbour likely had a 2 to 3 second jump on Greenhouse crossing the pitch, and in my prep for this video, Greenhouse described Harvard to me as one of the best snitches to ever play the game. So realistically, a catch was highly unlikely. Unfortunately for UNC, that is not the decision that Hines makes. She lands a beat on Greenhouse squarely, but her ball ricochets off into the UMD side of the field. This leaves UNC bloodrowless for what will be the remainder of the game. Now let's go back to the Quaffle game and slow things down a little. Off the restart, McGregor has to immediately dish the ball to Maselli, as he is tap beat by Dane. But rather than hustle to his hoops, McGregor spends a few seconds watching Maselli, effectively eliminating any chance he has of ever getting back into this offensive possession, and thus eliminating the power play advantage the Tar Heels had gained due to the foul. With 15 seconds left, Maselli chooses to initiate the offense as Aaron Mallory comes running back into the play. This goes against a classic concept in buzzer beater situations like this one, which is holding for the last shot. As long as this possession is the last of the overtime session, it is impossible for UNC to lose during it. Maybe Maselli thought it was late enough that UMD wouldn't have another chance anyway. Maybe he was worried about Dane pressuring him and forcing a turnover at midfield that could have led to a Maryland goal. Or maybe he just liked the offensive opportunity he saw in front of him. But regardless of the reason, he decided it was time to go. Maselli uses a spin move to get around Mallory's initial wrap, and Dane steps high to prevent him from getting any further into the lane. But as Maselli goes to release a pass, Mallory gets a key last-second wrap on him, stunting his body momentum and taking some of the power off the throw. How important was that little bit of power? Well, as the ball hurtles towards its mark, a cutting Troxler behind the hoops, we find out exactly how important it was. Barrows, now forced into the keeping role with King out of the game, backtracks on the pass. But he is also, unfortunately, one of the shortest players on the pitch, wearing the green headband. As he reaches the apex of his defensive leap, his right arm just barely brushes the ball, deflecting it away from the awaiting Troxler. Had the ball had even an inch more height, it would have likely resulted in a Troxler goal that would have all but ended the game with a UNC win. As the Quaffle careens behind the hoop and the clock hits 10, Barrows and Troxler both give chase. Barrows wins the race and now has a choice to make himself. He can take the safe route, diving onto the ball, securing possession, and likely taking the game to double overtime. Or he can take the riskier route, attempting a quick pickup that could result in a botched recovery and a turnover, but also might give the team one last chance to score. Barrows takes a second to peek back and then makes up his mind. He moves his body to the side, reaches down with one hand, likely made possible only by the receiver gloves he is wearing in this play, and snatches the ball out of the path of a diving Troxler. Barrows is now approximately 45 yards from the hoops that he needs to score in with 9 seconds to go. He just played an entire tournament, and he's extra bundled from the weather. Luckily, he also happens to be one of the fastest players to ever play the sport. Barrows cuts down the left side with Culhane about 3 yards in front of him. But within the first 15 yards of their sprint, Barrows has already gotten a full yard on him and put his back to Culhane. Culhane makes a desperate attempt for an arm grab. An even decent one likely slows Barrows enough that he cannot possibly score on this possession, but Barrows is able to slip through the grab. He crosses midfield at the 5-second mark and closes another 5 yards before finally coming up to his set Maselli, ready to make the tackle. Knowing that he likely lacked the time to get past Maselli and score himself, Barrows uncorks a pass to teammate Aaron Mallory, who stayed ahead of him throughout the fast break. Mallory receives the pass with McGregor draped over her and 3 seconds left on the clock. There has been plenty said about the sequence that takes place from this moment. McGregor has a number of defensive options available to him, even more so than he would have in today's game. This is because this tournament took place in 2014, and the Bluzikowski clause in the rulebook had not been put in yet. What is the Bluzikowski clause? The clause that requires time to stop during overtime when an advantage is called is the Bluzikowski clause. It comes from a play in a Southwest Fantasy tournament where a team abused this rule to get a victory. But at this time, the rule didn't exist, so McGregor could have freely fouled Mallory to ensure the goal doesn't happen. Sure, he would pick up the foul, but time would also run out and they would go to double overtime. While he would be serving time in that double overtime, with Eric King already serving said time for Maryland, it would really just even things out, and at minimum would allow the goal to not be scored. He also, of course, could have gone for a fully legal wrap, just to force her off balance and make a shot all but impossible. Instead, McGregor attempts to put his arm to the ball so that Mallory cannot release it. Mallory sees the opportunity and uses her left arm to stiff arm McGregor, pushing his body back and keeping his hand just short of the ball in her right arm. This is a classic tactic around the hoops that is also discussed in our Unmarked Chaser series. With McGregor off balance and falling backwards, Mallory is free to release an open shot at the hoop. But as she does, her release angle is ever so slightly off. This could be because she was slightly further from the hoops than she's used to being for this shot, as McGregor's momentum did push her slightly backwards. Or maybe it's just that in that moment her shot happened to be a little off. But in the end, it didn't matter. The ball careened off the tee bar and through, winning Maryland the game and the regional title, and marking perhaps the most famous buzzer beater in Quidditch history.